Here white has a rook in e5, a king in e6, and then black has a king in c4 and a pawn in b5. The first move that might come to mind is king to d6, probably because it feels like it's better to get the king closer to the opponent's pawn. But that's just wrong. The way to continue this is rook to e4, which forces the opponent to play king to c5. Now king to c3 loses quickly because of king d5, so the king actually is getting closer to the opponent's pawn. And then after b4, rook c4 check forces the king on the same file of his own pawn, and then king c5, white's got two attackers and will win the pawn. So after rook to e4, black is forced to play c5. So now white can get his king closer, and black pushes the pawn. Rook e1 is the crucial move. Now why is that? It's important because rook e1 is getting the rook ready to check the king in c1 for whenever it's going to be necessary, or control b1 anyway. King c4, king e4, king c3 is this is the moment when rook plays c1 check. What's the idea? The idea is to get the opponent's king on the same file of the opponent of his own pawn, right? Now, if king plays b2, that is just bad for black, since the rook can just go up and the king come closer. But best way to continue for black is king to d2. So now rook b1 attacking the pawn, and the only move for black is king to c3, which allows us another tempo move. King to e3, black has to play, say for instance, b3, and now rook to c1 check again. The only difference this time is that the white king is protecting d2, forcing the black king to go on the same file of his pawn, allowing us to play a king to d2. Now there's no need to continue, although but if we really want to, king to a2 for instance, and now just rook d1, a tempo move. Black pushes his pawn and then king c2 wins the game. There's nothing that black can do anymore. And regarding the previous situation, if the king had gone to, say, b2, now all we needed to do was rook up, and the king might try to play a2, king d3, and then pushing the pawn doesn't really help because of rook b8, pawn to b2, king c2, and that's the same thing. Now here white has a rook in e7, a king in d8, black has a king in c3 and a pawn in b5. The best move for white to try and stop this threatening pawn, as in the previous example, here the best move is rook to c7 check. Now the idea remains similar. Basically we want the opponent's king to go on the same file of the opponent's pawn while we carry the king around. There's two options basically. Let's look at king d3 first. Now king d3 has to face rook b7, which means that the king is forced to go back to c4, and now the king is free to reach the square c7, and the idea is to bring the king to the a file, and meantime while the rook guards the b file, the king will be able to support it and capturing the pawn. So for instance, let's say b4, king b6, b3, king a5. Well, pawn cannot push to b2 because it will be captured by the rook, so king c3, king a4, b2, king a3, and when the king plays to c2, it's over for the black player. After rook c7 check, king can choose to go to b3, and after king d7, pawn to b4, king to d6. Now it's important to play king to d6 because king to c6 allows the black player to reach the c file again, creating the opposition against the opponent's king, the white king, and being able to push the pawn all the way down and force eventually the white rook to sacrifice. King d6 is important because it gives black only one reply, which is king to a2. And now in this situation, this is a pattern that it's very important. This is very important to remember. How does white win this game? King c5 is the first move, b3, and then king b4. Now this is important because after pawn to b2 we've got check in a7, which again forces the black player to go on the same file of his own pawn, and this time we have a king here, so that's why king to b4 was important, because it stops the king from reaching either b3 or a3, and it forces the king to go to b1, and after this move king to b3. So obviously we need to attack the pawn with two pieces. We're not going to win this game with the rook on its own. So now after king c1, which is the only move, rook c7 check, king b1, rook to b7, and now after king to c1, king a2 wins for white, and if king to a1, then check, king b1, and then rook a2. Now here white king is in a8, white rook in a7, black king in b5, black pawn in a6. Now here the best move is rook to b7 check. Now the king is forced to the c file because it would be pointless to go on the same file of its own pawn. Now king plays a7, pawn to a5, and now it makes sense to continue chasing after the pawn with the king because the rook doesn't really need to follow the pawn, since the rook can move as many steps as it wants. After a5, king a5, after a3, king a4, and after a2, now the best move is rook to c7 check. Now the king cannot reach b3, b4 or b5 because they're all protected by the white king, so he's forced to go to the d file. After king d3, now feel free to pause the video, and so the solution is rook to c1. It wasn't really difficult, right? Because the rook is protecting the c file and it's creating a box that the king can only reach d2, for instance, and now rook a1 wins.